Nova had learned to love the silence. 5 years of living alone in the mountain cabin had taught her that silence wasn't empty. It was full, full of bird songs at dawn, full of wind through pine trees, full of her own thoughts, which were finally healing years of being told they didn't matter. She was hanging herbs to dry when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong in her peaceful forest, the baying of hounds, men's voices rough and excited. Hunters. Nova's hands settled on the rosemary she'd been bundling. Hunters weren't unusual this Emi of year, but these voices had an edge to them, a cruelty that made her wolf, small and emid as it was, press against her consciousness with warning. She should stay inside, should bar the door, and wait for them to pass. That was what she'd been doing for 5 years, hiding, surviving, staying invisible. But then she heard another sound, a whimper, low and pained, an animal in distress. Nova's healer instincts, the ones her mother had carefully nurtured before everything went wrong, overrode her caution. She grabbed her medical kit and slipped out the back door, moving quietly through the trees toward the sound. What she found made her blood run cold. A wolf, massive, with silver-white fur that gleamed, even mawed with blood. He was dragging himself across the forest floor, 3 arrows protruding from his side, his back leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Behind him, maybe half a mile away, she could hear the hunters gelling closer, their voices excited as they discussed their prize catch. The wolf's head lied and brilliant golden eyes met hers. He growled, a warning sound, but it was weak. He was dying. Nova didn't think. She dropped to her knees beside him. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, "but you need to trust me. Can you walk even a leal?" The wolf stared at her, and she saw the moment something shied in his gaze. Recognition, maybe, or just desperate Eon. He struggled to his feet, swaying dangerously, and Nova caught him before he could collapse again. "Come on," Nova urged, wrapping her arm around his massive body, taking as much of his weight as she could. He was enormous, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, and she was small, even for an Omega, but she'd always been stronger than she looked. Her mother used to say it was because she had to be, that the moon goddess gave extra strength to those who'd face extra hardship. They moved painfully slowly through the trees. Nova could hear the hunters gang closer, could hear them discussing tracking the blood trail. One voice in particular made her skin crawl, rough and eager, talking about how much a pelt this size would fetch. Her cabin was only 200 yards away, but it felt like miles. The wolf stumbled several eames, and each eame Nova hauled him back up, whispering encouragement. "Almost there. You're doing great. Just a little further. I've got you. You're going to be okay." When they finally reached her cabin, Nova practically dragged the wolf inside, leaving a trail of blood that made her heart sink. The hunters would see it. They'd know she'd taken their prey. She led the wolf on the rug in front of her fireplace, grabbed every blanket she owned, and covered the blood trail as best she could with dirt and fallen leaves. Her hands were shaking as she worked, knowing it probably wouldn't be enough, but having to try anyway. Then she barred her door, checked all her windows, and prayed to the moon goddess that the hunters would pass by. They didn't. 5 minutes later, there was a heavy knock on her door. "Open up. We're tracking a wounded animal. Trail leads right to your cabin." Nova took a deep breath, checked that the wolf was hidden behind her sofa, and opened the door just to crack. 3 men stood on her porch. They were rough-looking, with the kind of faces that suggested they enjoyed causing pain. The leader, a scarred man with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them, looked her up and down in a way that made her want to slam the door shut. Well, well, what do we have here? His eyes traveled over her white hair, her pale skin, her pink-edged eyes with obvious distaste. An albino living all alone out here. That's dangerous, sweetheart. All kinds of bad things could happen to a girl like you, isolated like this. No one to hear you scream. Nova forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. I haven't seen any wounded animals, just me and my herb garden. That's so. The man pushed past her, shouldering the door open despite her protest. The other two followed, their eyes scanning her small cabin with predatory interest. Because we tracked a wolf right to your door. Big silver beast, worth a fortune to the right buyer. Some nobles pay extra for unusual pelts. Nova's heart was pounding, but she kept her face neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been inside all morning working on my remedies. The scarred man walked through her cabin, slowly, overturning furniture, checking behind her curtains with rough, careless hands. His companions joined in, rifling through her belongings with no regard for her property. One of them picked up a delicate glass vial her mother had given her, a precious keepsake she'd treasured for years, and deliberately dropped it, laughing as it sharred. Oops, clumsy me. He ground the broken glass under his boot, destroying the last physical reminder she had of her mother's workshop. Nova bit her tongue, fighting the urge to react. The wolf was right there, hidden behind her sofa, bleeding and vulnerable. If they found him, they'd kill him and probably kill her for hiding him or worse. The way these men were looking at her, the way they moved through her space with an et-led aggression, made it clear they didn't see her as a person deserving of respect. The scarred man stopped in front of the sofa, his head eleng, like a predator sensing prey. What's behind here? Storage, Nova said quickly, proud that her voice didn't shake. Just old blankets and winter supplies. I keep them there because the mice can't reach that spot. He reached for the sofa, his hand already gripping the edge to move it, and Nova knew she was about to be caught. Her mind raced, trying to think of something, anything to distract them. But then, from outside came the sound of his hounds howling frantically. A different trail. Fresh prey. Boss, the dogs found something. Sounds big. The scarred man hesitated, his greed wearing with suspicion. He looked between the sofa and the door, his jaw working as he calculated. Finally, the promise of a new hunt won out. Fine, but I'll be checking back, sweetheart. He leaned in close, his breath reeking of alcohol and something rowan. And if I find out you lied to me, if you've got my prize hidden here somewhere, well, lie. Thing like you all alone out here. Accidents happen. Tragic things would be a shame if your cabin caught fire one night with you inside. They lease, slamming her door hard enough to rowel the windows and knock one of her mother's dried herb bundles to the floor. Nova waited, barely breathing. Until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then she collapsed against the door, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She'd just hidden a wolf from hunters, lied to dangerous men who'd made it clear they had no qualms about hurting her, put herself at risk for an animal she didn't even know. Her parents would have been proud and horrified, and probably would have done the exact same thing. Nova's parents had been healers in the Clearwater Pack. Her mother, Lyra, had been born albino and had faced prejudice her en-ire life. People whispered that she was cursed, that her children would be cursed, that allowing her to stay in the pack would bring bad luck. But she'd been too talented a healer to cast out, and her skill had earned her a grudging place in the pack. Her father, James, had been a beta who'd fallen in love with Lyra, despite everyone telling him he was making a mistake. He'd courted her openly, defying the whispers and disapproval, and they'd been genuinely happy together. They taught Nova that healing was about compassion, not polyex, that every life had value, regardless of what it looked like or where it came from. When Nova was 16 and presented as an Omega, the pack had been disappointed, but accepting. Omegas were valuable, even if they weren't as prized as alphas or betas. But when it became clear she'd inherited her mother's albinism, the whispers started again. The pack's new alpha, a cruel man named Victor, had declared her a bad omen. He'd publicly stated that her presence was weakening the pack, that she was the reason for a bad Huneng season and a harsh winter. He'd given her parents an ultimatum: abandon Nova to live as a rogue, or leave the pack in Airlie and take their curse with them. Her parents had chosen to leave without hesitation. They'd packed up their belongings, said goodbye to the few friends brave enough to speak to them, and headed for neutral territory. They'd been planning to join a pack called Haven, known for accepting outcasts and wolves with unusual Gs. But they'd never made it. Rogues had to act them on the road 3 days into their journey. Nova's parents had fought desperately, had managed to hide Nova in a hollowed tree trunk and tell her to stay silent no matter what she heard. She'd huddled in that tree for hours, listening to the sounds of Baal, listening to her parents' last stands, her mother's final scream, her father's roar of grief and rage. When silence finally fell, Nova had climbed out to find her parents' bodies. The rogues had taken everything of value in Lee. Nova had been 16 years old, orphaned and alone, with nothing but the supplies in her parents' pack and her mother's journal of healing knowledge that Lyra had always kept hidden in a secret pocket. She'd wandered for months, avoiding both rogues and pack territories before finding this abandoned cabin in the mountains. It had been falling apart, the roof leaking and the walls crumbling, but it was shelter. She'd spent her first winter here, slowly dying, barely surviving on what lily she could forage. But when spring came, she'd found her mother's journal and started following the instructions, growing herbs, making remedies, slowly rebuilding not just the cabin, but herself. And she'd been here for 5 years now, keeping her head down, staying invisible, surviving on El today when she'd risked everything for a wounded wolf. Nova turned back to her patient and carefully pulled the sofa away. The wolf was cell there, cell breathing, but his breaths were shallow and labored. Fresh blood had seeped through his silver fur. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering over the arrows, and took a steadying breath. "Okay," she said solely, more to herself than to him. "I need to remove these. It's going to hurt a lot. But the longer they stay in, the more damage they do. And I can smell the poison on them. Whatever they coated these arrows with, it's not meant to kill quickly. It's meant to keep you from shying so they could take you alive. Can you stay? Sell for me?" The wolf's golden eyes met hers, and she saw something almost human in them. Understanding. Trust. He lowered his head to his paws in a gesture of submission, offering himself to her care completely. Nova worked quickly, but carefully, using techniques her mother had taught her from the journal. The first 2 arrows came out relatively cleanly, though each one made the wolf whimper in pain. But the third had barbed eps and was lodged deep near his lung, deliberately designed to cause maximum damage if removed improperly. Every eme she pulled, the wolf's breathing hitched and tears streamed down Nova's face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just a lily more. You're being so brave. Just hold on." Finally, the arrow came free with a gush of dark blood. Nova packed the wound immediately with pickuses made, from yarrow and comfrey herbs that would stop bleeding and prevent infection. She added a layer of golden seal for the poison and a touch of feverfew to help with the pain. She splinted his broken leg with careful precision, wrapped his ribs to support his breathing, and covered him with every warm blanket she owned. By the eve she finished, it was dark outside, and she was exhausted. Her hands were covered in blood, her dress was ruined, and every muscle in her body ached. The wolf had lost consciousness somewhere during the process, his sides barely rising and falling with each labored breath. Nova curled up on the floor beside him, one hand resting on his head, and whispered prayers to the moon goddess. Please don't let him die. Please. I couldn't save my parents, but maybe I can save him. Maybe this one thing I can do right, please. She fell asleep like that, her white hair mixing with his silver fur, two outcasts finding each other in the darkness. When Nova woke the next morning, the wolf was awake and watching her. His fever had broken during the night, and his breathing was steadier, though Cell labored. Relief flooded through her so intensely that she started crying again. You're alive. Oh, thank the goddess. You're alive. The wolf made a chuffing sound and his tail thumped weakly against the floor. Nova laughed through her tears and gently stroked his head, checking his wounds carefully. They were holding. No signs of infection yet, though she'd need to watch them closely. Are you hungry? You must be starving. Let me get you some food. She made broth from the venison she'd been saving for winter, rich and nourishing, adding healing herbs that would help his body recover faster. She helped him lap it up slowly, supporting his head when his strength flagged. He managed a few mouthfuls before exhaustion claimed him again, but it was more than she'd hoped for. Over the next 3 days, Nova fell into a routine. She'd wake at dawn and check his wounds, changing bandages and applying fresh picuses. She'd make him food and help him drink water. She'd talk to him as she worked, filling the silence with stories about her parents, about the herbs she grew, about the books she'd read a dozen emies because she only had 5 books to her name. I think you're a shire, she told him on the second day as she cleaned the wound near his lung. You're too big to be a natural wolf, and your eyes are too intelligent. There's something almost human in the way you look at me. I don't know why you can't shift back to human form. Maybe the arrows had some kind of poison that's preventing it. Maybe you're just too weak, but you're safe here. I won't let those hunters hurt you, I promise. The wolf watched her with those intense golden eyes, and Nova could swear he understood every word. Some eames, when she'd say something particularly personal, his ears would prick forward or his tail would wag slightly. It was like having a conversation with someone who couldn't talk back, but who was listening with their whole being. It was comforting in a way she hadn't expected, this quiet companionship, ere so many years alone. On the second day, she told him about her parents' death, something she'd never spoken about to anyone. I heard everything, she whispered as she applied salve to his injuries. I was hiding in that tree, and I heard my mother scream, heard my father roar, heard the rogues laughing. I wanted to help them. I tried to climb out, but my mother had used her alpha voice on me before she hid me. Told me to stay silent and sell no ma, or what. So I did. I stayed in that tree like a coward while my parents died. The wolf made a sound low in his throat, almost like a whine of sympathy. His head moved slightly, pressing against her leg in comfort. Nova broke down, sobbing into his fur, and the wolf stayed perfectly still, lung her cry, offering silent support. On the third night, Nova was sitting by the fire, singing solely while she setched up a tear. In one of her dresses. It was an old lullaby her mother used to sing about the moon goddess watching over her children. The wolf was resting nearby, his head on his paws, eyes half closed. He seemed more alert today, his wounds healing faster than she dared hope. The moon sees all. The moon knows all. The moon loves all her children. Nova sang, her voice so and sweet. In darkness deep, when lost sheep weep, the moon will guide them home again. Through forest wild and mountain steep, through dangers dark and sorrows deep, the moon will guide them home again. She didn't know Ys when the wolf's eyes opened fully, when his Aenear body went cell and focused on her. Didn't know Ys the way the air in the cabin seemed to change, becoming charged with something she didn't have a name for. Didn't know Ys the way his tail began to wag slowly, or the way his ears perked forward with intense interest. What she did know Ysy was the sound, a howl, distant and haunting, coming from the forest. Then another, and another Anel. It seemed like the Enere mountain was alive with the sound of wolves singing, their voices weaving together in a harmony that made her chest ache with something she couldn't name. Nova stopped singing and went to her window. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Wolves, dozens of them. No, more than dozens. At least 40, maybe 50. They were emerging from the forest like ghosts, moving slowly toward her cabin through the moonlight. Some were limping badly. Some had visible scars that looked like they'd narrowly survived death. Some were so thin their ribs showed through their fur. One was missing an eye. Another had a twisted leg. A third had patches of fur burned away. They were all different sizes, different colors, different ages. But they all had one thing in common. They were all damaged, broken, lost, just like her. And they were all coming to her cabin, drawn by something she couldn't see. But they clearly could. Nova's heart was racing as she watched them arrange themselves around her cabin. They didn't approach the door. They simply found spots in her yard, in the surrounding trees, and led down, watching. Why? Eng. Some were grooming each other's wounds. Others were simply lying close together as if the proximity to others like them was healing in itself, as if they'd been called to this place and were content to simply be near it, to exist in its presence. She turned to look at the silver wolf by her fire and found him watching her with an expression that might have been satisfaction or pride or something else she couldn't identify. His tail was wagging steadily now, and there was something knowing in his golden eyes. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Why are they here? Did you call them somehow?" The wolf stood slowly, carefully, testing his injured leg. It held his weight much bigger than it had yesterday. He limped to the window and looked out at the gathered wolves. Then he looked back at Nova and dipped his head in what was, unmistakably, a bow of respect. Before Nova could process what that meant, before she could ask any more questions, the silver wolf's body began to shimmer. She watched in awe as he shied, his form blurring and reshaping, bones reforming, and fur receding un-el. A man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, powerfully built, with silver-white hair that fell to his shoulders and those same intense golden eyes. He was completely naked, which made Nova quickly avert her gaze, her cheeks burning hot. "I apologize," he said, and his voice was deep and rich with an authority that made her small Omega wolf want to curl up in submission. "I didn't mean to shine in front of you like this. My name is Kyle, and I owe you my life." Nova grabbed a blanket from her sofa and thrust it at him, Sel not looking. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her rib cage. "You can shy. You could shy this whole Amy?" "No," Kyle said, and she heard rustling as he wrapped the blanket. Around himself, the arrows were epped with silver and wolf's bane, a poison specifically designed to suppress shying. Your healing finally purged enough of it from my system that I could return to human form. You can look now. I'm decent." Nova slowly turned back to face him. He'd wrapped the blanket around his waist like a makeshift kilt and was leaning heavily against her table, clearly cell-weak from days of injury and the effort of shying. Up close, she could see the extent of his injuries. His torso was covered in fading bruises and powerfully healed wounds that would have killed a normal wolf. "You need to rest," she said, her healer instincts overriding her shock. "You just shied for the first Ime in days. Your body needs Ime to recover. You should." "I'm fine," Kyle interrupted gently. "Or I will be, thanks to you. But first, I need to explain what's happening outside, and I need to tell you who you really are." He gestured to the window where the wolves were gathered in a scene that looked like something from a dream. "Do you know what you are, Nova?" She blinked at him, thrown by the question. "How do you know my name?" "You told me," he said with a small smile that transformed his serious face. 3 days worth of stories about your life, about your parents, your childhood, your favorite herbs, the books you've read so many eames you can recite them, about how you heard your parents die and couldn't help them. I remember all of it, every word. Nova felt heat creep up her neck and spread across her face. She told the wolf things she'd never told anyone, personal things, embarrassing things, her deepest fears and greatest regrets. And it had been this gorgeous, powerful man listening the enere ime, understanding every confession. "To answer your question," she said, trying to regain her composure and failing miserably. "I'm an Omega albino, orphaned, living alone because no pack wants someone who looks like a curse. I'm not anything special." "You're wrong," Kale said solely, and there was something almost reverent in his voice. "You're a sanctuary, one of the rarest GIs the moon goddess can give. Places where you live, where you make your home. They become refuge, safe havens that call to wounded souls, to damaged wolves, to anyone who needs healing and protect on. Those wolves out there, they felt your sanctuary calling to them. They came because this place, because you offer them something they can't find anywhere else. Safety, acceptance, home." Nova stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. "That's not possible. I'm just a healer. I grow herbs and treat minor injuries. I'm not. You saved my life," Kyle interrupted, taking a careful step toward her. "You risked your own safety to hide me from hunters who would have killed you for interfering. You spent 3 days nursing me back to health, never asking for anything in return, never expecting me to be anything other than a wounded animal who needed help. You gave me your food, your blankets, your Ime. You sang to me when I had fever dreams. You cried over me when you thought I might not survive. That's not just healing, Nova. That's grace. That's compassion in its purest form. And grace is what creates sanctuaries." He took another step closer, his golden eyes intense. The wolves outside felt it the moment your G fully awakened. It happened when you sang tonight. The old lullaby, the one your mother taught you. Music is one of the ways sanctuary magic manifests. Your song called to every wounded wolf within 50 miles, and they came not to harm you or demand anything from you, just to be near the sanctuary you've created, just to exist in a space where they're safe and accepted. Nova's mind was reeling. "But I can't take care of 50 wolves. I barely have enough food for myself. I don't have the space or the resources." 4. "You don't have to take care of them," Kyle assured her. "They'll take care of themselves. They'll hunt, find shelter, live their lives. But they'll stay near your sanctuary, Because it gives them peace, a place where they feel safe, where they're not judged for their scars or their weaknesses. And in return, they'll protect you. No hunter will ever threaten you again. No danger will reach you. You've just acquired the most loyal guard in the Aniri territory. He moved closer, and Nova found herself backing up Unel. She hit the wall. He stopped immediately, giving her space, but his eyes never let hers. "There's something else you need to know," he said quietly. "I'm not just any wolf, Nova. I'm Kale, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. I was hunting the men who've been poaching in my lands, killing wolves for sport and profit. I shied to my wolf form to track them through the forest, and I was careless, arrogant. I thought I didn't need backup. I thought I was invincible, and I nearly died for my pride." Nova's eyes went wide. The Alpha King. She'd been harboring the Alpha King in her cabin for 3 days, had told him her life story, had cried on his fur, had sung him lullabies like he was a pet, had bandaged him and fed him and treated him like any other payant. "Oh, goddess," she breathed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have. I don't know what I should have done differently." "But you should have done exactly what you did," Kale said firmly. "You saw someone in need and you helped them. You didn't care if I was a king or a rogue or just a wild animal. You helped because it was the right thing to do. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people see a wounded creature and walk away because along involved is too risky? You didn't hesitate. You risked everything to save a life." He reached out slowly, giving her Ime to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of her white hair behind her ear. His touch was warm, gentle, reverent. "I've been searching for someone like you for years. Someone with a pure heart, someone who leads with compassion instead of calcula, Eon. Someone worthy of being my Luna." Nova's breath caught in her throat. "You're Luna, but I'm nobody. I'm an albino Omega with no pack, no family, no—" "You're a sanctuary," Kyle interrupted. "The first one born in 200 years. You're exactly what my pack needs. What I need." His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin with reverent gentleness. "When you sang tonight, when your Gi fully awakened, I felt something I've never felt before in my on-ear life. The mate bond snapping into place like a key turning in a lock. You're mine, Nova, my true mate. The moon goddess brought me to your door, bleeding and dying because she knew I needed to see who you really were, needed to see your heart." Nova's mind was spinning. This was too much, too fast. She'd gone from lonely hermit to Hosang the Alpha King to being told she was his destined mate in the span of 5 minutes. It felt like the world had turned upside down. "I need Emi," she said, her voice shaking. "This is overwhelming. I can't just—" "I know," Kyle said gently, dropping his hand but not stepping back. "I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just asking you to let me stay. Let me court you properly the way you deserve. Let me show you what life could be like with me, what it could be like to have a pack again. And if ere you've had Emi to think, ere you've go, and to know me as a man and not just as a wounded wolf, you decide you don't want the bond, I'll respect that. I'll leave and never bother you again. You have my word." He took a step back, pure long distance between them, making it clear he wasn't trying to pressure her. "I'm going to go outside and check on the wolves, make sure they're sealing in properly and understand the boundaries of your sanctuary. Then I'll sleep on your porch tonight. I won't impose on your space any more than I already have." "You're cell injured," Nova protested. "You shouldn't be sleeping outside in the cold. You can have my bed. I'll take the sofa." Kale smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something breathtaking. I'm an Alpha King, Nova. I've slept in worse places than a comfortable porch with a roof over my head. But I appreciate your concern. It tells me your healer's heart extends even to those who don't need your care anymore. He started for the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Thank you, he said solely, his voice rough with emo-eon, for saving my life, for showing me that there are cell people in this world who act from genuine kindness rather than calculin, for being exactly who you are, without apology or pretense. You're magnificent, and I hope you'll give me the chance to prove I'm worthy of you. Then he was gone, slipping out into the night, leaving Nova alone with her racing heart and confused thoughts. She went to the window and watched as Kyle, Estelle, wrapped in her blanket like a makeshift kilt, moved among the gathered wolves. They greeted him with respect, but not subservience, and she realized these weren't his pack. Wolves. These were the strays, the damaged ones, the ones who'd come seeking sanctuary. And he was traying them with the same respect they showed him, checking injuries, offering comfort, establishing himself as a protector rather than a ruler. He stopped to check an elderly wolf's arthritis swollen joints, his hands gentle as he examined the damage, knelt beside a scarred female who was clearly trauma-eased by something. Speaking solely on Elle, she stopped shaking, gently examined a young wolf who was far too thin, determining what injuries or illness had left them so malnourished. He was kind to them, patient, caring, everything an alpha should be, and so rarely was. Nova's hand went to her chest where she could feel something new, a warmth that hadn't been there before, a connection that felt like sunlight and strength and safety all wrapped together. The mate bond, barely formed, but growing stronger with each moment she watched him care for the wounded wolves in her yard. She'd found her mate, the Alpha King himself, and he'd found her in the most impossible way, bleeding and dying on her forest floor. Over the next week, Cale courted her in the old way, the traditional way that most modern wolves had forgotten. He hunted game and lay it on her porch, always the best cuts, always prepared with consideration for what she might need. He repaired the parts of her cabin that had been damaged by and weather, his hands skilled despite his royal status. He helped her tend the sanctuary wolves, bringing them food and checking their injuries with the same care he'd show his own pack. And he talked to her, really talked. He told her stories about his pack, about growing up as a prince who knew he'd be king someday, about the weight of responsibility, about the loneliness of leadership, about his family, his parents, who died in a challenge 5 years ago, his younger sister who'd made it into a neighboring pack. I've been ruling alone since I was 23, he admired one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sanctuary wolves play. Everyone expected me to find a mate immediately to produce an heir to secure the bloodline, but I couldn't. Every omega they brought before me, every carefully arranged meing felt wrong, like trying to force a puzzle piece that didn't fit. I knew the moon goddess had someone for me. I just had to be patient enough to find them. He looked at Nova with such tenderness it made her chest ache. I never imagined it would be like this, that I'd have to nearly die to find you. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat, if it meant I got to meet you. Nova found herself falling in love, not with the Alpha King, but with Cale, the man who sang terrible off-key songs while he chopped firewood, making her laugh until her sides hurt, who asked her opinion on complex pac-matters and actually listened to her answers, valuing her insight, who played with the sanctuary wolves like a puppy, rolling in the grass and letting the young ones climb all over, him, who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, like her white hair and pale skin were beautiful rather than cursed. On the 7th night since he'd knocked on her door, Nova finally found the courage to talk to him about the bond. They were long on her porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool night air, watching the sanctuary wolves play in the moonlight, when she said, "I felt it. The mate bond when you told me who you were." Cale went very still beside her, and his voice was carefully neutral, but she could feel his tension through the bond, his hope and fear mixing together. "And I'm terrified," Nova admitted. "I'm nobody, Kyle. I've been alone for 5 years because I didn't fit anywhere. I don't know how to be a Luna. I don't know how to be part of a pack again. How to navigate polyx and hierarchy. What if I'm not good enough? What if your pack rejects me like mine did? What if I disappoint you? What if?" Cale pulled her into his arms, silencing her, spiraling thoughts with his embrace. "My pack will love you," he said firmly. "Not because you're my mate, but because you're you. Because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. Because you create sanctuary wherever you go. Because you're brave and kind and strong and everything a Luna should be." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "But more importantly, I love you. I've loved you since that first night when you risked everything to save a dying wolf. When you cried because you couldn't stand to see something in pain. When you sang lullabies to comfort a creature that couldn't even talk back. When you told me about your parents and your fears and your dreams, never knowing I was listening but sharing yourself anyway. I've loved every moment of Gyalung to know you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you're not just good enough. You're everything." Nova felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you, too," she whispered. "I tried not to. I tried to be practical to protect myself, but you make it impossible not to love you." "Is that a yes?" Kyle asked, hope blazing in his golden eyes. "Will you accept the bond? Will you be my mate, my Luna, my partner in all things?" "Yes," Nova said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll be your mate. I'll be your Luna. I'll be whatever you need me to be." Cale kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. The mate bond flared between them like a star being born, bright and perfect and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nova could feel it sealed in her chest, warm and permanent and uurly complete. "There's one more thing," Cale said, his voice rough with emotion. "My pack, the Royal Guard. They've been searching for me. I sent them away when I came to hunt the poachers. Told them I'd be fine alone, but by now they're probably panicking. I need to contact them. Let them know I'm alive and I want them to meet you. Is that okay?" "Your whole pack?" Nova asked nervously. "How many are we talking about?" "The full Royal Guard," Cale admitted. "About 100 wolves. They'll want to see for themselves that I'm safe, and they'll want to meet their new Luna." Nova took a deep breath. 100 wolves on top of the 50 sanctuary wolves already here. Her quiet little cabin was about to become very crowded. "Okay," she said, "but can we have one more night, just us and the sanctuary wolves, before everything changes?" "Of course," Cale agreed, pulling her close. "We have all the eme in the world." They sat on the porch together, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sanctuary wolves play under the moon. And for the first eme in 5 years, Nova didn't feel alone. She felt like she'd finally come home. The next morning, Kyle's pack arrived. Nova had expected it to be overwhelming, and she was right. The Royal Guard flowed through the forest like a silver river. Massive wolves in perfect formation, their power palpable even from a distance. They moved with military precision, a testament to their training and discipline. At their head was a huge gray wolf who shied the moment he saw Kale standing on Nova's porch. "Your Majesty," the man said, dropping to one knee without hesitation. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with silver streaking his dark hair and scars that spoke of countless Bay-Ilis. "Thank the goddess. We've been searching for a week. When you didn't return and we found signs of hunters, we feared the worst." "I'm fine, Commander Ash," Kyle assured him, his voice carrying the authority of a king. "More than fine, actually, thanks to my mate." He pulled Nova forward gently, his hand warm and steady on her back. "This is Nova, my true mate, and your new Luna." The change in the commander's expression was immediate and profound. He rose and bowed deeply to Nova, and there was no trace of judgment or disappointment in his eyes. "My Lady Luna, it's an honor beyond measure. We're at your service." Behind him, the 100 wolves of the Royal Guard shed to human form in a coordinated wave and bowed as one. Nova was overwhelmed by the show of respect, especially when she saw their eyes. There was no judgment there, no disgust at her appearance, only curiosity, welcome, and what looked like genuine relief and happiness. "Rise," she said, her voice shaking slightly but growing stronger. "Please, you don't need to bow." "With respect, Luna," Ash said with a warm smile. "Yes, we do. You're our queen now. That means everything. You saved our king's life. You gave him sanctuary. You accepted him without knowing who he was. That makes you worthy in ways that have nothing to do with the mate bond." Over the next few days, Nova learned what it meant to be Luna. Kyle's pack didn't just accept her. They embraced her with an enthusiasm that took her breath away. When they learned about her sanctuary GE, they were thrilled rather than wary. They helped her expand her cabin into a proper compound, building adional structures with incredible speed and skill. They brought supplies and food, more than she'd ever need. They integrated seamlessly with the sanctuary wolves, treating them with the same respect they showed their own packmates. And when the hunters came back a week later, looking for the silver wolf they'd lost and for the albino girl who'd interfered, they found themselves facing not just Nova's sanctuary wolves, but the Eniri Royal Guard. The hunters were arrested on charges of illegal poaching, attempted murder of the Alpha King, and threatening the Luna. Their Opera Eon was shut down permanently, and Nova's sanctuary was officially declared protected territory under the Alpha King's law. The Maeng ceremony was held under the full moon, with both the Royal Guard and the sanctuary wolves in Atao Endance. Nova wore a dress of silver and white that Kale had commissioned specially for her, designed to reflect her unique beauty rather than hide it. Flowers were woven into her white hair by the pack's young women who treated her like a beloved older sister. And when Kale marked her as his mate in front of everyone, declaring their bond before the moon goddess and all witnesses, the gathered wolves howled in celebrion. The sound echoed through the mountains, a song of joy and belonging that Nova felt in her very soul. Years later, when young wolves would come to Luna Nova, seeking guidance or sanctuary, when they felt broken or alone or different, she'd smile and tell them the truth, that she'd hidden a wounded wolf from hunters 3 nights before the Alpha King knocked on her door, that he'd turned out to be the most powerful shire in the territory and her destined mate, that some Eames, the greatest love stories start with a simple act of kindness, a moment of compassion when no one is watching. She'd tell them about sanctuary, about how creating safe spaces for broken things was one of the most powerful forms of magic. She'd tell them that being different wasn't a curse but a G, that the things that made you stand apart were Owen, the things that made you special. And she'd tell them that love, true love, wasn't about Perfecon. It was about finding someone who saw your scars and loved you, not despite them, but because they understood that those scars meant you'd survived, that you were strong, that you were worthy. 3 nights, she'd say, looking at Cale with eyes full of love. That's all it took. 3 nights of caring for a wounded wolf, not knowing he'd end up caring for me for the rest of our lives. The moon goddess works in mysterious ways. Some Eames, the person you're meant to spend forever with, shows up at your door bleeding and desperate. And some Eames, if you're brave enough to help them, they end up saving you right back. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more werewolf romance tales, alpha kings, rejected mates, and powerful Omega stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of Nova and Cale's story and what kind of werewolf stories you'd like to see next. Your support means everything and helps me create more content like this. Thank you for reading, and I'll see you in the next